Hi there. Welcome to Nightlight Theatre. Tonight's story, one about friendship and kindness. Before we begin, if you'd like to support the channel, Patreon link is in the description below. Now, take a breath, get cozy, and let's drift into it. Once upon a time, a tiny wood mouse lounged within a wise old oak tree. The wind blew through the bountiful branches that hung low. Rain pelted down into the earth, soaking the dark green leaves and drenching the small window the tiny mouse had carved into the tree himself. The old oak that many have called home had stood through countless seasons, its bark worn smooth in places where generations of woodland creatures had brushed against it. In the dark of the night, only light that gleamed through the harsh haze of the storm that brewed above was the candlelight from inside the mouse's house. There, inside, he perched on his green armchair he loved so very much, a well-loved book within his tiny paws, and a porcelain teacup right at his side filled with the warm brew of passion flower tea. He always brewed passion flower on stormy nights. The ritual itself was calming. The careful pouring of hot water, the slow steeping, and the faint herbal scent that rose was like a quiet promise of safety and comfort. Surrounding the tiny wood mouse were tall carved-in shelves that were filled with an endless amount of books, some tall, some small, and others with worn-in spines from years of reading, while ones that have yet to be read stand patiently waiting for the mouse to pick them up. The room felt full in the way only a well-loved space could. Warm, breathing, and shared. In the hush between thunder rolls, there was a quiet presence nearby that made the storm seem far away. Our tiny mouse friend wasn't alone in his wooden haven. After all, what was a quiet reading night without someone to share it with? Curled comfortably within a soft nest nearby rested his dear friend, Honey the Bee. Her tiny wings tucked close as she slept peacefully, lulled by the rhythm of rain and the warm glow of candlelight. Mouse watched his tiny friend sleep soundly down below. A soft hush filled the home along with the cozy sounds of the rain hitting the old oak tree, drawing Mouse's attention to the warm delight waiting for him on his old oak table. Steam curled up into the air as Mouse lifted his cup. He sipped slowly, listening to the rain whisper against the bark. The scent of wet earth filled the room while candle wax dripped lazily onto the table. The tea soothed Mouse's soul. Soft and earthy, the taste brought a smile to his little snout. This tea was always the one to calm the tiny mouse, even in the most frightening of times. Stormy nights had once terrified him. Thunder would rattle the oak walls, and Mouse would spend these nights huddled under his burnt orange cotton blanket, curled up in his green armchair, trembling as his tiny heart pounded against his furry chest. He would just weep for hours as he waited for the storm to come and go. But that's when his bestie bee, Honey, would come to his aid. Honey would come to his cozy abode, tea bags in hand, and companionship ready to be given. She would cuddle up to the trembling mouse and soothe his woes with the comfort of a nice story to keep his mind clear. Now, on these stormy nights, Mouse reads a good book with his best friend at his side. Honey stirred in her nest, her wings fluttering about as she slowly sat up, looking towards her mousy friend with his nose deep in his book. "Mousie, my dear, you should head to bed, my silly friend." "Honey, my sweet, I can't possibly," Mouse responded, shutting his book for a moment to look down at his tiny friend. "This book is simply too good to put down." Honey shook her head with an affectionate smile. She knew there was no arguing with Mouse when he got caught in a marvelous book. She rubbed her eyes in an attempt to rub away the sleeplessness that plagued her. She glanced out the window, a sigh escaping her mouth when she saw the weather had not let up. "I worry this weather will continue into tomorrow. The flowers can't handle being watered this much," she remarked. "If the plants are overwatered, they'll drown. And if the soil is constantly wet, the roots won't be able to breathe." Honey had spent the entire spring tending to each bud as though it were her own. She knew which blossoms leaned toward the morning sun and which preferred the shade of Mr. Oak's wide leaves. She remembered the first tiny sprouts breaking through the soil and how proud she felt watching them stretch upward. The thought of anything harming her garden made her wings tremble. Mouse hated seeing his little friend stress. He climbed out of his armchair, leaving his book in his seat as he sat with Honey in her nest, his furry paw starting to rub her fuzzy back. "Honey, do not fret. The flowers are strong, and you know it. They have withstood this rainy season just fine so far, and I know they can make it through to the end." Even with his words of encouragement, Mouse could see his little friend continued to worry. But Mouse got a little idea. Mouse stood up, walking towards his little library, climbing the wooden ladder he had built for himself, and plucked a book from the highest shelf. When he returned to Honey, he smiled down at her, sitting beside her. "Look, my sweet, this is your favorite, no? This little book of poems was the first one I put on my shelves just for you." Honey perked up. Instead of hanging her head low, she rested it on her tiny friend. "You sweet small mouse, I can't believe you remembered." "Why wouldn't I? You're my dearest friend," he smiled. Mouse opened the book and flipped through the pages. "Ah, yes," he remarked. Mouse read aloud a poem about flowers blooming in every season they could, no matter the weather they endure. They bloom bravely through the rainy days of spring. Beneath the warm golden glow of the summer sun, the restless autumn winds, and even through the quiet cold of winter's snow. He murmured as his paw rubbed Honey's back, calming her nerves and stilling her wings from their fidgety fluttering. As Mouse finished the poem, he watched as Honey drifted back into her peaceful slumber. Mouse rose slowly in order to not disturb his sleeping friend. Laying Honey back in her nest, tucking his burnt orange blanket around her. As Mouse was putting the book back upon the shelf, a soft knock sounded from his front door. Mouse paused, his ears lifting, his gaze flicking to Honey, but luckily she remained sound asleep in her nest. Another quiet knock followed, barely louder than the pounding rain outside. Mouse padded carefully across the wooden floor, towards the front door. When he opened the door, the sight before him made his whiskers twitch with surprise. "Hello, little one. Are you all right?" he questioned curiously. Standing before him was a small hedgehog, soaked from their nose to their quills, shivering under the dark storm sky. "Forgive me for intruding," the hedgehog said softly, "but I am in need of shelter. The storm shows no signs of easing." Mouse did not hesitate. He ushered the trembling hedgehog inside and closed the door against the rain. From a nearby wicker basket, he retrieved a folded blanket and wrapped it carefully around the small visitor. "Now what are you doing inside in such harsh weather?" he questioned. "I was trying to return home," the hedgehog replied, pulling the blanket closer as their quills gently poked through the fabric. "I had hoped the rain might stop, but it seems it has only grown heavier. When I saw the light from your window, I had hoped that I might find warmth here." They gave a small, nervous smile. "My name is Yumi. May I ask yours, kind sir?" "You may call me Mouse," he said with a reassuring smile. "Would you care for some tea? It should warm you right up." "I would enjoy that very much, thank you, Mr. Mouse," Yumi spoke softly. Their sights fell upon the sleeping bee curled up in the small nest. "Oh, I'm truly sorry. I wasn't aware you had company." They spoke even softer, worried about waking Mouse's little friend. Mouse glanced at Honey as he padded across his wooden floor, standing before his little tea station. "Oh, don't you worry. Honey is just enjoying a little nap. She sleeps quite deeply, so do not worry about her waking." Mouse reassured Yumi as he poured some of his passionflower tea into a cream-colored teacup. "Why don't you take a seat?" Mouse asked as he gestured to a green armchair, willing to give it up for his new friend. Yumi hesitated for a moment before picking up Mouse's unfinished book and setting it on his table beside his own teacup before climbing into the chair. "You're too kind, Mr. Mouse." "Nonsense. There's no such thing as being too kind," Mouse smiled as he handed Yumi their teacup, taking a seat on his patchwork cushion beside Honey's nest. "Now tell me, little one, what kept you out so late?" "I was tending to Mr. Oak's nearby garden," Yumi said with a smile. "He has such lovely flowers growing this spring." At the word flowers, Honey's eyes opened, her head tilting up to look at Mouse's chair, and instead of her dear mousy friend, there was a hedgehog in his place. "Are you talking about the flowers?" she asked. Yumi blinked in surprise as they watched the bee rise, staring up at them. "Oh, yes, I was." They glanced down. "I was caring for them before the storm got worse." "Are they all right out there?" Honey asked quickly. Yumi glanced at Mouse before nodding. "When I left, the flowers were perfectly fine," they smiled. Honey let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her wings folded neatly at her side. "Thank you," she whispered to Yumi. "The flowers mean more to me than I can say." Yumi offered a small smile. "They are stronger than they appear." Mouse looked between them and poured another cup of tea, providing it to Honey. Outside, the thunder sounded farther away now. Not gone, but softer. "Storms have a way of reminding us how sturdy we truly are," he said gently. Yumi took a sip of their tea before looking back at Honey. "I can tell that you deeply care for Mr. Oak's garden, just as much as I do, Miss Honey." "Oh, darling, you are certainly correct. I tend to those flowers and all their needs. They are all an important part in my heart," Honey explained. "Every creature and plant deserves tender care and love," Yumi smiled. "You are so very right, Miss Honey," they said as they glanced out the window. "I view that garden as my own little family," Yumi remarked. "My first burrow was right beside Mr. Oak's tree, so I could always see the garden. I've always lived within this wise oak. I've watched every spring as the flowers sprouted from the ground. Despite the large amount of rain we receive every year, the plants seem to bloom even brighter for it," they said. Yumi's paws tightened slightly around their teacup at those words. The soft click of porcelain against the saucer filled the small pause that followed. "I used to think the rain only brought trouble," Yumi admitted. Honey tilted her head to the side. "Trouble?" Yumi nodded, their gaze drifting toward the window, where the droplets traced slow paths down the glass. "My very first burrow was not as sturdy as Mr. Oak's roots," they said. "It rested in a patch of earth just beyond the garden. I had worked so hard digging it. I was so very proud of it." Mouse tilted his head as well, his whiskers twitching. "My little friend, you talk about your burrow as if it's in the past. What happened to it, little one?" he asked, his voice gentle. This seemed like it wouldn't be the happiest story. Yumi pouted. "Last spring, one of the many storms that occurred was even worse than usual. My burrow ended up flooding during it while I was away. I returned to find it completely ruined. The entrance had collapsed inward, the tunnel walls softened into mud. The small collection of nuts and berries I had stored turned into mush and floated uselessly against the edges. Even the little alcove I had carved for resting had been entirely filled with water. It no longer felt like a home," Yumi whimpered. "I decided to move deeper into the forest where there were more trees than just Mr. Oak. I found an area with a little community of trees that would provide some more shelter from harsh rain than Mr. Oak could. But that means I'm ever so far away from the garden he provides. That's why I'm here tonight. I couldn't make the long journey home." Mouse got up from his cushion, attempting to wrap his arms around Yumi, but he just poked instead, so he gently grabbed their hand when they finished their story. "Oh, you poor thing. That's truly awful, little one." Honey didn't stay in her nest, fluttering over onto the armrest of Mouse's chair, rubbing Yumi's arm. "It's all right, darling." Yumi looked between the two, their eyes slightly wide. Yumi had never been shown such kindness, especially from creatures who barely knew them. "You're both so very lovely. Thank you," Yumi spoke softly. "Little one, there is no need to thank us. That's what friends do." Mouse smiled and hugged Yumi, enduring the poking from the prickling quills. "Exactly, darling. We will always be here to comfort you." She gently rubbed Yumi's cheek. Outside the tiny wooden home, the thunder began to calm. The once pounding droplets of the rain now started to shift into a soft drizzle. The stormy clouds began to disappear one by one and show the starry night above and waning crescent moon. The wise old oak tree creaked, a noise more similar to a sigh, as the water droplets dripped from his leaves down into the wet soil, creating tiny puddles below. The light from Mouse's house started to grow a bit dimmer as the candle burned lower and lower, casting long golden shadows along the carved shelves. Mouse looked around his little home at Honey perched gently beside Yumi, at all the teacups still warm waiting for their paws to return, and at the door that had opened the storm and brought something unexpected inside. "Little one," Mouse began gently, "perhaps storms take some things from us, but sometimes they guide us somewhere warmer," he said as he glanced around his cozy oak home once more. "There is always room here when the rain feels too heavy," he finished with a smile. Yumi rested their head on Mouse's arm, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, friend," they said softly. The three of them sat still for a moment, content within each other's embrace, before Honey made the first move back to her nest, picking up her teacup again to finish the remnants of her tea. Mouse gave Yumi one last nuzzle before he also returned to his teacup and seat, leaving Yumi in the chair, but with a warmth that only friendship could provide. Only when they sat back down did Mouse realize there was an odd silence they hadn't heard in hours. The storm had finally ceased, not to a complete stop, but to a calm sprinkle. The sky, which was once torn with lightning, was now rested beneath soft moonlight and comfy clouds. Mouse cracked open the window, and the smell of the earth after a rain began to mingle with the passion flower brew to create the most wonderfully calming aroma, just as the gentle rhythmic singing of the crickets began again. Mouse smiled as he looked at Yumi, who was now completely dry and now content, half asleep in his chair. "Little friend, you should stay the night. The storm is gone now, but it's so terribly late. Rest here." He spoke softly, for he also noticed Honey was drifting back into her slumber. "There is always room in the oak for friends." Yumi nodded as they yawned. "Thank you, Mr. Mouse." They mumbled before their eyes shut tight, drifting off into the most relaxed sleep they have experienced in a long time. Mouse watched his two friends fall into a well-deserved snooze. He very slowly rose up, picking up the discarded teacups, placing back his long-forgotten book, and stood for a moment next to the window as he watched the last raindrop slide down the glass. He made sure Honey was tucked in once again before he draped another blanket across the curled up Yumi and walked to his old oak table, blowing out the candle. He cautiously returned to his cushion as the moonlight drifted in to guide him, wrapping himself snugly in his blanket before he too drifted off to sleep. The oak no longer groaned beneath angry thunder, but whispered softly as droplets slipped from leaf to leaf. Mouse closed his eyes, listening to the steady breathing of his friends nearby. Honey gave a gentle sigh in her sleep, and Yumi's tiny chirps sounded as though they dreamt of a sunlit garden and dry earth. And though the tiny pitter-patter of the remaining raindrops tapped the bark outside, inside the wise old oak, warmth lingered stronger than any wind. Beneath the hush of the passing rain, 3 small hearts rested peacefully, knowing that no storm could ever wash away the comfort of kindness. And with that, we end tonight's story. Good night and sleep well.